behavior you get with NXJ. I scrolled down a form, but now I can no longer see my toolbar at the top. Versus the bottom picture with a toolbar, you can see I scrolled a little bit, but the toolbar is always on top. So if I now switch over to a browser, let me get to the one here. So this is the screenshot that we had seen with the previous webinar, using different images and toolbars to get to different areas and do different database operations. You'll note the top level toolbar gets hidden as I scroll. You can't get to the operation here. So depending on how you implement the toolbars, the mini toolbars like I did here, that may not be an issue, and you may not want to take that real estate at the top of your form. But if you do want to do that, if you want to have the toolbar anchored at the top, you set the lock frames property, and then you can come over. I'll go to my entry forms here, and I have a long form set up here to show this. And what you'll see now, this application, this project has lock frame set, and notice as I scroll, it stays at the top no matter what. So the user can always get to that. And you're seeing a lot of web applications now where the toolbar hovers at a certain spot, and that's what you're accomplishing here. Now if we go back to our presentation to our next topic here. So hiding and showing form regions on an NXJ form. NXJ forms have always been pretty static as far as hiding things. You could always hide fields and labels, but that space was never reclaimed. You always had this blank area on the form. So there are ways, however, to keep that from happening, to have NXJ at runtime reclaim that space if you want to hide an area. So the way that you do this is using our box container and placing objects in that container that you want to be able to show as being visible or not visible, and then creating a way to toggle that, whether that's using a link, just a regular button, or in my case, for my example here, using an image button. So the little image on the right side here is showing, and we'll see the actual form, using expand collapse icons to show invoices or contacts and reclaim that space, so users can drill down and get to information without having to always see it. But again, the way you do this is with our box container. The box container has a method called hide when, and so anyone who's Lotus Notes familiar may recognize this name from our Composer line of products and the NXJ variation of that. We inherited this feature to hide regions and expand and collapse them dynamically. So again, you might use an image icon to do this, and usually if you're doing that, you'll make that image icon dynamic. That's what this other icon here is, another image here, showing the properties of our image button, and that its source, what image it shows, is dynamic by using the equal sign and a variable name, which points to a string variable that will contain the path to the image. Now to get this to be retoggled, to check and see whether to show the area or not, is done with what we call a refresh hide formula method, or a command actually. So anytime you want to recheck whether something should be visible or not, you cue that command, and it will evaluate all the hide when methods for the different box objects. So this is all well and good. What does it really look like? Well, let's go to a couple of things here first. So for the images, continue on that for a second. What you usually have is some static content. In my case, I have an expand collapse icon, so the close icon and the open icon. And then we have a command tied to those image buttons, in this case called hide show invoices. And the method itself is pretty short. So that's just our bottom region here on the code. The top are just the initial settings of values. So Boolean, whether to hide the invoices or hide contacts, as well as what the initial image is for those buttons to expand and collapse. The command itself, this is just the invoice one, it just negates the value of the current value of hide invoices, and then depending on its value, decides which image should be shown, and then it goes ahead and refreshes the hide formula. What I didn't show here, so I'll go to the IDE to show that, is the hide when method for that. It's very simple. It's a one-line return of that value of the hide invoices Boolean variable. So how does this look at runtime? So hide show region is my test form here to demonstrate this. So what we have, this is using our island database and just small forms for things. So we have an expandable area on our form, so we can either do the invoices or the contacts or any combination of those up. So you can drill down very easily and collapse and control space. So just a simple example of doing it. We can give you these projects too. If I toggle over to NXJ and show you where the region is, the way this is laid out, so my data view, the data region, is inside a box, or a box object here, and my box has simply one method in it. It just has a Boolean hides when method that's created automatically off of the event section list, and it returns a Boolean value. Remember the logic though. When it returns true, it will hide the region. So think about the name of the method, and that will clue you in, because I certainly have done the opposite of what I intended sometimes using this. Okay, so back to our PowerPoint. And this is showing what we just demonstrated there, whether you're expanding all or collapsing all, or individual ones. And I did this with data views as an example, embedded data regions. This could be detailed information that users don't always want to see, so you can expand and collapse it. One thing to note, however, that if you have other fields, anything else in that same vertical space, that area will not be reclaimed because those other pieces are still visible. Another screenshot of them being expanded. Okay, so data views sometimes can be wide. You have a lot of information to show and only so much either height or width to show it. And since we're sort of oriented in x-axis for showing multiple columns, you have to decide what you want to do with all that information. We had one customer that was keeping track of brain scan information that had literally 100 columns they wanted to show in a single data view. So they either had a really wide form or split the information across different tabs. But if you have a wide data view and you're trying to create your forms for either a lower resolution monitor or just make it so users don't have to scroll the whole screen, you have a couple of options. So you can, using the tab control, all these things act on the tab control, you can have some of the columns be virtually hidden, but the users can still scroll to them via tabbing. You can also make the tab page itself scrollable, so actually get a scroll bar at the bottom of the toolbar, and we'll see each of these options. There's also a way to make the repeating area inside a data view to be scrollable just by itself, and that's useful when you're doing ones outside of a tab set. So what you'll see here and then also in our wizard is that sometimes the tab control is used even though you aren't necessarily using it for the tabs, because you can hide the tab part of it. That gives you this extra functionality. So to hide the columns on a page, there's a property of the tab itself, so not of the data view, but the container tab, that is called the overflow X, and there's an overflow Y as well, but X is the most commonly used one. You can set to different values. One of those values is hidden. So that will make all the fields in the non-visible area to the right hidden, but as the user clicks on a field and presses the tab key, the area will automatically scroll between to the next visible field. Now, when you're designing this, and it's true of the other cases here as well, you design it wide, make everything visible, and then resize the tab set to overlap to your general size. So you won't actually see all of your data view on the tab set when you're in your final design there. So just be aware of that. It's a trick to get around to make this work well. So this is showing the design side on the left and then the runtime at the right, and again we'll walk through that at runtime. So another way to do this, and probably the preferred way, is to set the overflow X property to scroll. This will give the scroll bar, like our bottom image shows here, bottom right image. It gives a scroll bar on the entire tab so the user can scroll to all the fields. And again, you resize the tab set when you're at design time to fit the area. So one other way to get a scroll bar on a repeating area is to set a property of the repeating area, not of the tab or of the data view, but of the repeating area. You can set the horizontal scroll width property to either an absolute number of pixels or to a percentage of size of the repeating area. So if you set to a percentage, for example, 75% there, at design time it looks okay, it looks wider, but at runtime it will be narrower and will give you the scroll bar within the repeating area. So I'm going to go over to our runtime again here to show this. And this was dynamic width. So again, these forms were not, even though this is about making the experience better, these forms were done to demonstrate the features, not to make them a fully complete application. So let's go to the hidden ones as we talked to it first. So this is this region, again, going into our island database from SQL base. We've shrunk down the tab set, and as we scroll through, users can get to other columns. The bad part here is that users don't know there's more. So unless they know that. So it's available, but usually you wouldn't use that. Instead, you'd usually use the tab overflow so the user has a scroll bar and they can get to all the different fields here. And one thing to note, if you stay positioned to the right and you switch your records on the main, if you're doing master detail, it does keep you positioned to where you were so users can scroll through data and look at columns without having to keep scrolling left and right. There's also a tab auto one that really behaves very similar to the overflow setting, so either you can use that or overflow. Now I mentioned the repeating area scroll, and what you're seeing here, instead of the scroll bar being at the bottom of the tab set, it's within the repeating area itself. So again, the users can go to there instead. And it will also go through the scroll bar and move you, and as you switch records back and forth, it will maintain your position. Now, the bottom data view down here is showing the repeating area scroll setting, the percentage, but outside of the tab set, showing that if you need to do that outside of the tab set, you can and get the scroll bar at the bottom of the repeating area. Okay, so back over to our presentation. So one of the things that we're doing now is what we want to talk about is how to use NXJ to quickly and easily create wizard kind of step-by-step processes for users to walk through. Anyone who's seen our NXJ BPM demo or business process management demo, we simulate an order entry system, and so that's where you're going to see the slide pictures from and the simple application showing using a wizard to do that. With NXJ, the way you do a wizard easily, instead of doing form to form, next form to next form to next form, you can do this by using our tab set, and instead of showing regular tabs, show them as elevators, and then you can change the style of that, and you'll see what it looks like at the top by default. So you sort of end up with a header very easily to let users know what's going on. So for each page of your wizard, whether it's an installation kind of thing, or in our case, an order entry one, you create a tab for each one, put the fields and data views on there that you need, and then navigation is usually done through links or buttons that, in our case, and you can implement this a variety of ways. The way we've done this in the past is to use buttons, and because NXJ now, for those that might use the older ones, there's a command parameter option to the command property of a button or a link that can give a string value to the command as a single parameter. So that's very useful in saying, in our case, where you are or where you're going to next tab-wise. And then inside the code, to hide and show the various tabs, you'd use the set tab page property to be able to make visible, to hide and show the different tabs of the wizard and toggle which one's current. So if we look at a couple of screenshots here, what we're also wanting to show in here as well is that highlighted yellow icon at the top of how to show a progress bar as well. So a lot of websites will have a icon at the top that changes showing how far along the wizard you are. So you also want to just describe how to do that. And that is similar to what we talked about using the expand collapse one, using a dynamic source property for the image button, which in our case here is doing the progress image value. So on the left is the data view that we're using to do this, As this is at design time, you'll notice we only have 4 items in our tab in our wizard. We select the items, we verify the billing information, shipping information, and then place the order. So what you're seeing at design time is all of these are visible. One thing you do want to remember, and it's probably easier to go into the IDE, so I'll do that in a second, is once you have everything sized correctly, you want to sort of overlap the number of tabs you have so you don't end up with blank space at the bottom of the table, of the tab set. So you want to overlap things once you're done with the design. So a couple of ways to do it and things to remember. The snippet of code, well, first, the images that we're using for our progress bar, again, that we'll see in the example, are in our static content folder, and we have status steps 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the code snippet at the bottom is just showing how we're dynamically doing it. We're keeping track of an array of what the tabs are and where we are, and we're using that to construct dynamically the name of the image to use. So it's always going to be the status step plus the next value of the one or previous one. So I've sort of been doing the demo all along here, so we're going to ignore this slide. So if we go back over to our starting points here, we're going to do a new order form. Again, this is taken out of our NXJ Business Process Management demo. A couple of things to look at here are we have the status area at the top that says step 1 of 4, and we have our data view in the middle here, our tab cell data view is embedded. In this case, this was a copy order entry system, so we can choose different values and get that rank total. You notice there's a next button here to continue through, and as we do our next, it hides the previous tab, shows the next tab, and you can quickly go through this, and going back gets us back, and so on. And this is simply going through. Notice that the icon at the top is changing, which is really 4 separate icons showing the progress. And then the final one has a finished one, which is where you do your real work, whether it's storing the data in the database or in our case with starting an instance of a business process. In fact, if I press finish here, it will go ahead and save the record and display a little message to the users. So now, again, looking at the IDE for this, go to the new order form. What you'll notice is that in this tab set, I've shrunk everything down. So usually you'll design it down to your area, but then to avoid having the space for the extra steps, you will then size it up so that you only need space for one of the values. And if you haven't used the elevator one, as you click each one, it moves it down for you. Okay, so just because of how long we do our webinars, these are the things we wanted to show for you today. So at this point, I think we're ready to see if you have any questions or comments, and we can go from there.
Great. So just a reminder to ask questions. We went over this at the very beginning, but there was a few folks that came on pretty much at the start of Kevin's part. You have your WebEx toolbar. At the bottom, there's a button with a question mark. Just press that button to post your question, and what we'll do is we'll go silent here for about a minute or two and collect those questions that you may have, and then we'll come back on and start going through the questions. And again, use the little button on your WebEx toolbar with the question mark to post the question. Thanks. All right. Well, we're back on, and we actually don't have very many questions, but there are some. So one is actually a good comment. They're referring to the last part of Kevin's presentation where he refers to it as wizard. They actually commented that they would call that last part a screen flow rather than a wizard.
Absolutely.
Which makes sense.
It actually like that phrasing better, so I may borrow that. We'll give copyright information to you.
Okay. The next question, is there a way to perform a local directory browse without it performing an automatic file upload?
So you want to use our file chooser object, but have it not actually do the upload. Yes, if I'm thinking correctly what you're meaning here, if you add an onUpload event, you can cancel that. Well, it's still probably going to upload it. I believe we did something along the ways to cause upload not to happen. I believe we did that by controlling whether certain commands allowed the upload to happen. I know this is one of our customers that has our support option, so if you would, go ahead and pose that to support. Either I'll help support with that question, see if that's doable or not, or we will tell you we can't currently, or try and give you other ideas of how to do that.
Okay. And do you know what version of NXJ that was?
Yes, that's only been released in 11.7, so all the currently used and supported versions there.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll have to follow up with you, get with support, and see if we can follow up with you on that.
Yep.
All right. Next question. Actually, there are no other questions. That's the only one. So what we'll do is, if you still have more questions, please feel free to post them. But we apologize for the audio difficulties at the beginning of the presentation. We were able to correct the phone issue, but we had trouble with the VoIP. And so we're working that out with WebEx. We think we figured out what the problem is. You just couldn't get WebEx to fix it before the end. Hopefully, we'll see how that impacted the recorded version. Just so you know, we do these webinars monthly, and we make a recorded version available on our website. In fact, if you go to unify.com and you go under the news and events, you'll find archived webinars, and you'll find them on several of the different products. But primarily, you'll see them for NXJ, Team Developer, and SQL Base. So you can find these. If this one recorded okay, and we're not sure yet because of the audio problems we had, you'll see this on the website next week, early next week. But if not, and you need to get some of the audio content out of that, please contact your Unify representative, and we're more than happy to follow up with you personally. And your representative can arrange that with Kevin to go over any of the details from this or any add-on questions that may arise. So stay tuned. When you do go out of the session, you will get a survey. We ask that you take just a moment, just a minute, to tell us if there were things you particularly liked in this, and if there were things that you thought either A, we could do better, or B, you wanted to see that we didn't get to, because we definitely use those to help drive these monthly webinars. And so we're always looking for content for the next month, if you will.
And just to go on with that just for a moment there, because this series here is about making the end user experience better, there's a lot of developers out there at the NXJ that probably have done things that we just happen to not have seen how creative you've been with it. So certainly feel free to send those in as screenshots or projects, and we'll give credit where credit's due, and we'd love to see what you're doing.
Yeah, and actually a question that just came across is, will your sample code be made available?
Yes, in your case, the person who asked this, and anyone else, they can contact their sales rep or their support engineer to get a copy of this, and we'll be more than glad to give you the project.
Great. All right. With that, we thank you for participating. We hope you found it of value. Again, give us your feedback in those surveys, and we hope to see you on next month's webinar.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.